Fox Talk tonight, the driver next to you allowed to blast their stereo as loud as they want. I'm sure you've been through that. A state appeals court ruling you shouldn't get a ticket for loud music. That would be unconstitutional. So, when it comes to your stereo, the judge says it's free speech. But what about your safety? Of course, loud music means you might not hear fire engines or ambulances and who knows what else. Attorney Larry Walters and our cop doc, Richard Weinblatt, taking on, I think, both sides of the issue on this one tonight. Larry, I'm going to start with you. Don't my rights extend right up to the point where I put other lives at risk? So if I'm driving a 2,000-pound weapon, essentially, and I can't hear, isn't that, reckless endangerment?
Well, our rights are, under the Constitution, granted to the people, and unless the government has a compelling basis to interfere with those rights or to restrict them in some way, then we have those rights and we retain them. It is an unclear question now, in light of this court decision that we're discussing, whether you can play loud music and whether that does, in fact, endanger other people, and even if it does, whether the legislature wrote the law in such a way so as to be clear enough to be understandable.
Richard, is it unclear whether or not it puts other lives at risk?
I don't think it's unclear at all. Look, it's kind of like a speed limit situation. A lot of people have said that there's too much discretion, it's constitutionally vague, but we grant our professional law enforcement officers and their supervisors with judicial oversight that discretion. And if it bothers people within 25 feet, I think that's a good standard.
The speed limit is a perfect example. Now, why couldn't the legislature use a decibel limit for this law? If people knew what the limit was on what loud music is, that's one thing, but the way that the legislator wrote this, it is, well, if it's plainly audible within 25 feet, nobody knows what plainly audible means. There's no decibel limit. There's no speed limit counterpart in this law.
But don't then all of our police officers going to have to walk around with a little sound machine and name it? I think if the license plate is shaking back and forth, I think we can all agree that maybe it's a little too loud.
You have to have a practical application for a law, and like you said, Bob, I mean, you're going to have people walking around like sound engineers, and I think it starts to get a little bit onerous for officers to be able to do that with all of the other things they have to do.
Code enforcement officers walk around with decibel limit meters all the time. It's very simple. It's a cheap piece of equipment, frankly cheaper than the radar guns and the laser guns that they carry around. Wouldn't be any problem for them to carry a decibel meter limit.
Sounds to me like as arbitrary as all of this is, with the argument that we've had back and forth about where it is and what it should be, whether or not someone should get a ticket for what seems to be this sort of nebulous gray area that we can't seem to all agree on what how loud it should be.
It's not nebulous, Bob, when you're sitting there in your house or even at a stop sign and you can't even hear a siren coming, or you can't go to sleep. I mean, that's not nebulous for the person that's suffering from that. Okay. And professional law enforcement officers have good judgment. Let's let them exercise that within that context.
Okay, Richard, thank you, and Larry Walters. Guys, thanks for coming in and talking about this tonight.
My pleasure.